I'm quite accustomed to be the last one due to the letter of my surname, but this time it is really an honor. I thank you very much, you all, for inviting me here. And it's a pleasure, even if, according to my friend Jean, I'm becoming an old dinosaur, which is something that doesn't worry me at all, because most of dinosaurs were very tame, timid, vegetarian, and happy earthly beings. So maybe Jean only looks at T-Rexes. But having said that, we've been discussing the causes of the crisis very thoroughly, and I would like to focus on the way we tackled the crisis, and the Europeans worked on the solutions. And if I had to choose who to blame, I would blame the politicians. And if I had to give a title to the story, I would call it, my narrative would be The Strange Case of the Dentist Who Scared Himself to Death. And Marta Dassù asked us to convey a positive message, and the answer is yes, we can do it. Because after all we've heard before, Bruni, Nelly, Mattiolo, we know what we have done, and we know that we can do it again. So we had a chance, and the answer is yes. We can convene a positive message to the voters who will be at the elections in May. But on the other hand, the answer is no. Because if we look at the experience of the past 5 years, we have many reasons to be worried about the future. We've been living in the harshest crisis since 1929, it appears, but it was indeed a very different crisis from all other crises. And it was tackled at the beginning with very traditional solutions, and only during the crisis they started to change the pattern. But in the whole, it was ideology, lack of trust, as we said, the national interests, which were on the top of the agenda, North against South, rich against poor, and all commonplaces you can have. I mean, the Brits against the Italians are late, and whatever. But nonetheless, it would be wrong to say that all this resulted into a failure, because we have done incredible things. All of the mechanism to control the crisis, to prevent crisis, the reform of the financial markets has been something extraordinary. Maybe it's too little too late, but still it is extraordinary, and Europe's changed a lot. And still change we must. And the solutions, as Nelly was saying, must be implemented at once. But to implement solutions, we need a very strong political will, and that's the problem. We were mentioning treaty changes. I think it's totally silly to discuss about the hypothesis of a treaty change if there is not a project, a vision, an ambition, and the courage to do something different. Otherwise, it reminds me of the fake story about the Navy in Naples in the 18th century when they invented the story, and I apologize to the translators, of Facimma Muina, which means let's move a lot. Because we keep on changing the treaties just to hope that just by changing the treaties we can find a solution. And I could rephrase Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa and say that it's good to have a limited power if it is not weak. So we need strong powers, so before thinking of a treaty change, we maybe shall change the minds of our politicians and give ourselves and to the politicians a vision. So what happened to the politicians? First of all, they lied, or they didn't tell the truth. And they were scared by the markets, they were scared by pessimism, and they didn't tell the truth. And then they acted like they wanted to postpone the solution. They acted like the very popular Roman song in which these drunk people in Osteria, which is a Roman pub, when it comes the moment of the bill, they ask for more wine. So the bill will come, and when the bill will come, we will sort out how to pay the bill. And they did it on Greece. Greece could have been solved much quicker if Germany had different ideas and blah, blah, blah. No, now we know it. In 2009, people wrote, do it now, and it would be less costly. They didn't. And reforms has been another problem. And in Italy, again, it is a problem. Mattiolo was mentioning the Alcatraz, and Alcatraz could be a bearable solution if if it would be part of a long-term solution that includes an escape with recovery. But this is not what we are going to do. If you remember, in the 80s, there was and Mr. De Michelis will certainly remember this, and most of you will do. Ruud Lubbers was the leader in the Dutch politics. He made the toughest reforms possible in the history of the Netherlands. And he asked for very, very heavy sacrifice. But then he won the elections. And so maybe if you tell the truth to the people, then you can change the situation. And still the political leaders are just making a muina, they're just making movements and not telling the truth. They did it with Euro 2020, which is an empty box, as it was the Lisbon strategy. They did it with the Growth Compact in 2020. And they are doing it with the new Growth Compact now, because what was sold to the papers as a huge success in terms of the Youth Employment Initiative is 1% of the European budget, and therefore is 1% of the European GNP. So what shall we tell to politicians who give us a huge headline, says major success, when you give to the worst problem of European Union, which is youth unemployment, 1% of 1%. And there's a Dutch economy called, which I do not pronounce very properly, which is Eithinger, who talks of the Bermuda Triangle of short-termism. The Bermuda Triangle of short-termism starts with the politicians who do not take risks, and they just do short-term adjustments, short-term reforms, without thinking of the future. Then they give titles to the newspapers, then people expect something, but nothing happens. And then they give more statements, and then the situation gets worse and worse and worse. So there are three things that I would like to see as a citizen, before being a journalist or whatever, or a dinosaur. I would like to see the politicians to tell the truth, to tell the people these are the problem, and these are the way we are going to tackle the problem with. As Philip Stevens said yesterday, they should take risks. Mr. Draghi did it. And if I were a politician, I would be definitely ashamed by the fact that Europe was saved by a central banker, somebody that the Liga people in Italia would call a technocrat, who took the risk and said, I will save Europe if necessary. So he put himself in the place of politicians, and he saved Europe so far. So let's take risks, let's be creative, let's be true, let's be ambitious. If we are not this, Euroscepticism will grow, and I agree with Mon ami le dinosaure, because I don't think there's going to be too many Eurosceptics in the European Parliament. But I think that Euroscepticism is a chance, because it forces us to talk about Europe, because all these European leaders never talk about Europe. With Euroscepticism, we will force to go there and say, you're not telling the truth, this is the truth. And as Professor Bruni was saying, unfortunately on Europe you can say whatever, because there is not a narrative. So I can say that, I mean, we want to have straight bananas or whatever, and people like, and the British papers do it, immense titles. And that brings me to the last point, which is bringing, I want to talk to you a little, just 1 minute about the Holy Mary and the dentist I started from, because I like it. You should bring, in Italy, sometimes the European, and in some other countries, the European Union is seen as the Holy Mary icon in the street. You cross the road during weekdays and you do not even see her, but she's there. And then on Sunday you go and pray her and says, please, Madonna, let me. And that's a European summit. And then you call for help when you need a miracle. So what politicians should do is bring the icon of the Holy Mary back to the marketplace, back to the people, and give them an everyday miracle if they believe in it. Or they can be the good dentist. Now, I wonder whether anybody likes to go to the dentist in this hall. But therefore you go to the dentist, because if you have a problem, you know that the dentist is going to give you a little bit of pain, but then you'll be better. And so that a politician must act. Maybe you give me a little bit of pain, I will pay more taxes, but if I'm certain that you'll be the cause of my health and of my better health in the future, I'll be glad to follow you or to go to the dentist. So I wish that the European politician could be good dentists, and I'm ready that me and all the other people will be ready to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. This is true in general for not only for European politics, but for politics per se, I would say. Courage, skills, consensus, taking risks, taking pains. I mean, some of our policymakers did it. Schroeder, Blair, after all, they were able to introduce reforms. Nowadays is more, we are still looking around to see whether we have policymakers of that kind. In Italy, it's not so evident, I have to admit. But in any case, instead of going to the dentist right now, we go to the coffee break, which is